Deep sleep held Evan tight, a cozy blanket of dreams wrapped around him. One moment, he was chasing a rainbow in his mind. The next, a harsh, shrieking sound ripped through the quiet night. It wasn't a dream. It was loud, piercing, and angry, like a monster roaring right outside his window. He sat bolt upright in bed, his heart thumping like a drum. The sound wasn't just outside. It was everywhere, vibrating through the floor, shaking the very air in his small apartment. Across the hall, Leo was in a similar shock. He'd been dreaming of flying, soaring high above the city. The dream popped like a balloon when the ear-splitting wail of the fire alarm tore through his sleep. His eyes snapped open, wide and confused in the pitch-black room. What was that terrible noise? It sounded like 1,000 angry bees mixed with a giant whistle. He fumbled for his lamp, knocking it over in the rush. The alarm blared again, louder this time, sending a shiver down his spine. This wasn't a drill. This felt real. Evan scrambled out of bed, his feet finding the cold floor. The alarm was still screaming a relentless, urgent cry. He could hear other sounds now, too. Muffled shouts from down the hall, the quick patter of feet, and the sharp clang of a door closing. Panic began to prickle at him. He pulled on the first clothes he could grab, a thick sweatshirt and some sweatpants, his fingers clumsy with haste. The air felt heavy with the sound, pressing in on him from all sides. He glanced at his small window, but saw only his reflection, looking startled and scared in the dim light. Leo, meanwhile, was trying to make sense of the chaos. The noise was unbearable, a physical weight on his ears. He could hear it echoing from every floor, a giant, angry chorus. He pulled on a jacket, not even bothering with a shirt underneath, and grabbed his phone. His mind raced, trying to remember what to do in a fire. Stay calm, that's what they said. But how could anyone be calm with this racket going on? The building seemed to be alive with the frantic sound, a symphony of fear and urgency. He could hear the faint, distant wail of sirens joining the building's alarm now, adding another layer to the already overwhelming noise. It was a sound that meant trouble, a sound that meant something serious was happening, right here, right now, in the middle of their usually quiet apartment building. The air was thick with the blare, a constant, nagging demand to get out, to be safe, to run. The relentless shriek of the alarm filled Evan's ears as he fumbled for the doorknob. He tugged it open, and a wave of noise washed over him from the hallway. More alarms, louder here, mixed with the urgent shouts of people. Everybody out. Follow the exit signs, a deep voice boomed. Evan stepped into the hall, blinking in the dim, flashing emergency lights. He saw a stream of sleepy-eyed neighbors, some still in pajamas, shuffling towards the stairwell. The air was cold, even inside the building, and a strange smell, not quite smoke, but something sharp, tickled his nose. Leo, just a few doors down, was also pulled into the flow. He'd barely managed to tie his shoelaces before a neighbor, looking wide-eyed and worried, knocked firmly on his door, yelling, "Out, Leo! Out now!" He joined the procession, feeling a chill despite his jacket. The cold was different from the usual morning chill. It felt biting and unwelcome, a sharp contrast to the warmth of his bed just moments before. He could hear children crying, dogs barking in confusion, and the constant, piercing wail of the alarms. The stairs were crowded, each step echoing with the sound of many feet. Evan moved carefully, one hand on the cold railing, feeling the rumble of the building beneath him. He saw a young woman hugging a cat carrier, her face pale. An old man in a bathrobe leaned heavily on a cane, helped by a younger person. Everyone looked lost and a little scared, their faces lit by the frantic flashing of the emergency lights. The cold seemed to seep into his bones, reminding him that he hadn't thought to grab a warmer coat. As they reached the ground floor, the main door was already propped open. A blast of truly cold night air hit them, carrying the smell of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Outside, under the harsh glow of street lights, a chaotic scene unfolded. Fire trucks, their lights swirling red and blue, lined the street. Firefighters in big, bulky gear moved quickly, their radios crackling. The air was thick with the blare of sirens, now joined by the deeper roar of the trucks. Evan stepped onto the sidewalk, shivering. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to trap what little warmth he had. The cold was immediate and unwelcome, raising goosebumps on his arms. He looked around, trying to make sense of the crowd of people huddled together. The noise was almost overwhelming, a jumble of alarms, sirens, voices, and the hum of emergency vehicles. He could see his breath fogging in the frigid air. Leo, right behind him, also felt the sudden punch of the night air. He pulled his thin jacket tighter, wishing he'd grabbed a thicker one. The cold seeped through the fabric, making his teeth want to chatter. He saw Evan just ahead, looking just as cold and bewildered. They were out, but now what? The comfort of their warm apartments felt like a distant memory, replaced by the stark, freezing reality of the midnight street. The cold was a sharp reminder of how quickly life could change, turning a peaceful night into a scramble for safety. The street was a swirling mess of light and sound. Red and blue lights from fire trucks painted the building and the shivering crowd in strange, moving colors. Sirens wailed, not stopping, each one adding to a giant, loud song that hurt Evan's ears. He hugged himself tighter, trying to disappear into his sweatshirt. The harsh yellow glow from the tall streetlights made everything look stark and cold. He could see his neighbors, faces pale and worried, some holding blankets, some just in their night clothes, all huddled together like lost sheep. Leo stood near Evan, his breath making little clouds in the freezing air. He squinted against the bright lights, trying to see past the big fire trucks blocking the view of their building. Firefighters, like busy ants in their big yellow coats and helmets, rushed here and there, shouting into radios that buzzed and crackled. A man with a megaphone was trying to tell everyone to move back, but his words were lost in the noisy mix. The building's own alarm still screamed, a constant reminder of the danger. Evan watched as more people spilled out of the building, each one looking as confused and cold as the last. A small child, clutching a teddy bear, cried loudly, her mom trying to comfort her. A few dogs barked nervously, their tails tucked low. The air smelled of damp pavement, a hint of something burnt, and the sharp, clean scent of the cold night. It was a strange mix, making Evan feel even more out of place. This wasn't how a normal night was supposed to be. He noticed Mrs. Henderson from the third floor, her hair in rollers, pulling a small suitcase on wheels. Mr. Davies from the first floor, usually so cheerful, looked grim, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Everyone had a story, a dream interrupted, a sudden fear. The streetlights shone down on them all, making their faces look stark and worried. There was no escaping the noise, no escaping the cold, and no escaping the feeling of being suddenly homeless, even if just for a little while. Leo coughed, the cold air scratching his throat. He looked at the tall apartment building, dark except for the flashing emergency lights. He wondered what was happening inside. Was it a big fire? Just a small one? The unknown made his stomach feel jumpy. He could hear a firefighter talking loudly to someone, pointing toward the top floors. The sounds of the city, usually a gentle hum at this hour, were now a frantic, loud roar. It was a scary, chaotic picture, made even more so by the biting cold that nipped at their exposed skin. The harsh lights made the shadows long and dancing, adding to the unsettling feeling of the night. It felt like they were all stuck in a bad movie, waiting for the next scene to unfold. Evan shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable spot on the cold pavement. His eyes scanned the faces around him, many of them familiar from brief nods in the hallway or quick smiles in the elevator. He noticed Leo, standing a few feet away, shoulders hunched, his thin jacket doing little to keep out the chill. Leo was rubbing his arms, his breath coming out in shaky puffs of white. He looked really cold, even colder than Evan felt. A sudden thought clicked in Evan's mind. When he had rushed out his apartment, grabbing whatever was closest, he had snatched his favorite blanket from the back of his couch. It was a big, soft, fuzzy blanket, perfect for movie nights. He just wrapped it around his shoulders without really thinking, a small comfort in the scary rush. Now, looking at Leo, he realized he had something that could help. He took a deep breath, trying to push past his own shyness. He didn't know Leo very well, just a quick hello sometimes. But tonight felt different. Everyone was in this together. The alarms still blared, the siren screamed, and the cold was biting. A little kindness seemed like a good idea. Evan slowly unwrapped the blanket from around his own shoulders. It was a rich, deep blue, soft like a cloud. He walked the few steps over to Leo. "Hey," Evan said, his voice a little shaky over the noise. Leo turned, his eyes wide and surprised. "You look really cold," Evan continued, holding out the blanket. "I grabbed this by accident. It's big enough for two." Leo's eyes went from Evan's face to the soft blanket, then back again. A small, surprised smile touched his lips, even though his teeth were almost chattering. "Oh, wow," Leo said, his voice a whisper against the loud sounds. "Thanks, Evan. That's really nice of you." He reached out, his fingers brushing against the soft fabric. Evan opened the blanket wide, letting it drape between them. "Come on," he said, moving a little closer. "Let's share. It's warmer together." He didn't wait for Leo to answer, just gently pulled the edge of the blanket over Leo's shoulders. Leo stepped in closer, and Evan wrapped the rest of the blanket around both of them. It was a big blanket, so it easily covered them from their shoulders down to their knees. The soft, fuzzy material instantly brought a wave of warmth. It was a small pocket of comfort in the middle of the cold, noisy night. The alarm still screamed, the lights still flashed, but under the deep blue blanket, a tiny bit of the harshness of the outside world was blocked out. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the warmth of the blanket a welcome shield against the biting air and the chaos around them. Wrapped in the soft, blue blanket, Evan and Leo stood shoulder to shoulder. The immediate warmth was a welcome hug, a tiny bit of peace in the noisy night. The streetlights still cast their harsh glow, and the fire truck lights still swirled, but the blanket made a small, cozy world just for them. Their bodies, now sharing warmth, relaxed a little. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, the terrible noise started to change. The building's fire alarm, which had been screaming for what felt like forever, suddenly stopped. It was a sharp, quick silence, making everyone jump a little. For a moment, the world felt empty. Then, other sounds became clearer. The loud wail of the sirens from the fire trucks didn't stop all at once, but they started to fade. One truck would turn off its siren, then another, until only a few were still crying out in the distance. The shouts from the firefighters became less urgent, too. No more yelling about getting out or moving back. Instead, they spoke in lower voices, their radios still crackling but not as loudly. The hurried footsteps stopped, replaced by slower, more careful movements. The crowd of neighbors, who had been talking loudly and nervously, began to quiet down. The crying child whimpered for a bit, then settled against her mom. The dog stopped barking, only letting out a soft whine now and then. Evan leaned his head a little closer to Leo, finding a bit more comfort. "It's getting quieter," he mumbled, his voice feeling strange after all the noise. Leo nodded, his gaze still fixed on their building. "Yeah," he whispered back, like someone turned down the volume. He pulled the blanket a bit tighter around them, appreciating the shared heat. The air still held that faint, sharp smell, but it wasn't as strong. The raw, piercing sounds of panic were slowly melting away, replaced by a softer, steadier hum. The sounds that were left were different. The soft whir of a fire truck engine, the distant chatter of a few remaining emergency workers, the quiet murmurs of neighbors. It wasn't completely silent, not yet, but it was a much softer kind of noisy. It was a tired hum, a sigh after a big shout. The harsh, panicked edge was gone. The chaos that had filled every corner of the night was slowly giving way to a more gentle rhythm. Under the blanket, in their shared space, Evan and Leo felt the change more deeply. The loud, scary part of the night seemed to be passing, leaving behind a new, quieter feeling. It was still cold, but the sharp fear was beginning to soften into a weary calm. With the loudest noises gone, a different kind of quiet settled over the street. It wasn't a deep silence, but a soft, hushed quiet that made everything feel a little clearer. Evan and Leo, still wrapped in the blue blanket, became more aware of the things right around them. The biting cold air was still there, nipping at their noses and the small parts of their faces not covered by the blanket. It made their cheeks feel tingly and their breath fog white in front of them. But then there was the blanket. Oh, the blanket! It was like a warm, soft cloud wrapped around them both. The fuzzy material felt so good against Evan's skin, a gentle hug in the cold. He could feel Leo's shoulder next to his, a steady source of warmth. Their shared body heat mixed with the blanket's softness to create a small, wonderful bubble. Inside this bubble, the outside world, with its cold air and lingering worry, felt a little less scary. That blanket really is a lifesaver, Leo mumbled, his voice sounding a bit clearer now that the sirens weren't screaming. He shifted a little, pulling the blanket up higher around his neck. I only grabbed my phone. Didn't even think about how cold it would be out here. Evan nodded. Same. I just grabbed this on instinct. Lucky, I guess. He felt a tiny smile touch his lips. It really was lucky. He looked at the deep blue color of the blanket, a comforting dark spot in the bright, cold streetlights. The warmth it gave was more than just physical. It was a warmth of comfort, of feeling safe, even just a little, in a very unsafe situation. The cold air kept reminding them of where they were, a sharp contrast to the cozy warmth they shared. They could see other people still shivering, rubbing their hands together, or stamping their feet. Some tried to huddle closer to each other, but few had a big, thick blanket like theirs. Evan felt a small pang of sadness for them, but also a deep thankfulness for his accidental grab. The blanket was a small thing, just a piece of fabric, but it felt huge right now. It was a shield against the biting night, a quiet comfort in the big, messy world outside their apartment. It was a reminder that even when things were chaotic and scary, there could still be small moments of warmth and kindness. The cold air tried to creep in, but the blanket held it back, keeping their shared space warm and safe. It was a simple, yet powerful comfort, letting them feel a little bit more grounded amidst the lingering uncertainty. The quiet hum of the night, no longer pierced by alarms, made it easier to hear the little sounds around them. The gentle rustle of the blanket, the soft shuffle of feet from a few remaining neighbors, and the distant, polite conversation of firefighters. Under the comforting blue, Evan and Leo felt a little more at ease. The blanket wasn't just keeping them warm. It was creating a small, private space in the middle of the big, public street. Do you think it's a real fire? Leo asked quietly, his voice a soft murmur next to Evan's ear. He still looked at the building, now mostly dark except for a few flickering lights near the top floors. Evan shrugged a little, the movement making the blanket shift around them. I don't know. I didn't smell a lot of smoke, just that weird sharp smell. But it was loud enough to be something big. He paused, thinking, my cat, Mittens, is still inside. I hope she's okay. A small worry line creased his brow. Leo listened, then said, Oh, you have a cat? I heard some meowing sometimes, but I never saw her. He thought about his own apartment. I left my lucky keychain on my bedside table. It's silly, but I always take it with me. He gave a small, nervous laugh. And my coffee maker. I hope it's not ruined. Sharing these small worries felt strangely good. It was like letting out little breaths of air after holding them in for too long. They weren't talking about big, scary things, but the small, everyday bits of their lives that now felt far away and possibly in danger. I hope they let us back in soon, Evan said, pulling the blanket a little tighter. I was just about to read a really good book when the alarm went off. He laughed softly. Now I'm just standing here, reading the label on a fire extinguisher across the street. Leo chuckled. Yeah, I was actually trying to fix a leaky faucet in my kitchen. Guess that'll have to wait. Now it's probably going to be a bigger mess. He shook his head, a faint smile on his face. This is definitely not how I planned to spend my Tuesday night. They talked about the strange things they noticed. The way Mrs. Henderson's usually perfect hair was now a wild mess. The bright yellow of the fire truck ladders reaching high into the sky, how the streetlights made everyone look like ghosts. These little observations, shared in low voices, started to make the strange night feel a bit more normal, a bit more real. They weren't just two strangers anymore, but two people sharing a blanket, a strange experience, and a growing sense of connection in the quiet, cold air. Their soft conversation continued, a quiet thread weaving between them as the minutes ticked by. They talked about the strange look on Mr. Davies' face, the funny pajamas Mrs. Henderson was wearing, and how many fire trucks seemed to be there. Each small shared thought deepened the feeling of connection. Then, a new kind of quiet began to settle. The last of the faraway sirens finally faded into nothing. The fire trucks that remained had their engines off, their lights still flashing but no longer screaming. The radios that had buzzed and crackled in the firefighters' hands became silent. Even the hushed murmurs of the neighbors began to die down. People seemed to have said all they needed to say for now, or perhaps they were just too tired to speak. A deep, peaceful quiet fell over the street. It was a silence so profound that Evan could hear the soft whoosh of the wind in the bare branches of the trees overhead. He could hear the faint, distant hum of the city, a gentle backdrop to the unexpected stillness. It was a quiet that felt different from the usual night quiet. It was a quiet born from chaos, a calm that had followed a storm. Leo shifted, leaning a little more against Evan. "Wow," he whispered, his voice barely a sound. "It's really quiet now." He looked up at the dark sky, where a few bright stars twinkled. The harsh street lights still glowed, but even their light felt softer now, less urgent without the accompanying noise. Evan breathed in the cold, clean air. It smelled of winter and a faint hint of something metallic from the fire trucks, but the sharp, burnt smell was gone. The quiet felt like a big, soft blanket wrapping around the whole street, not just them. It was a welcome change, a relief from the overwhelming noise that had filled their night just an hour or so before. In this deep stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath. The urgency was gone. The immediate danger, whatever it had been, seemed to have passed. Firefighters were now standing in small groups, talking calmly, some putting away equipment. The crowd of neighbors, though still cold and tired, had grown still, simply waiting. Evan felt a sense of peace begin to bloom in his chest, a feeling he hadn't expected to find on such a chaotic night. The cold was still there, but it didn't feel as biting. The uncertainty about their homes was still there, but it didn't feel as pressing. The unexpected quiet had brought with it an unexpected calm, a moment of gentle rest in the middle of a very strange night. It was a quiet that let them think and just be together under the blue blanket. The quiet was so complete now that the smallest sound seemed loud. The soft rustle of their shared blanket, the distant drip of water from a fire hose, even the steady beat of their own hearts. Evan and Leo stood together, not needing to speak, just sharing the unexpected calm. The harsh street lights still shone, but their light seemed to soften in the stillness, making long, quiet shadows. Evan looked at Leo, really looked at him for the first time, not just as a neighbor he sometimes saw, but as someone who had shared this strange, scary night. Someone who had shivered beside him, whose worries about a lucky keychain and a coffee maker were just as real as his own about a cat and a good book. He felt a warm feeling spread through him, not just from the blanket, but from something deeper. Leo turned his head, catching Evan's eye. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "This is quite a night, huh?" he said softly, his voice gentle in the quiet. Evan nodded, returning the smile. "Yeah, not one I'll forget anytime soon." He thought about how he usually just kept to himself, how he rarely talked to anyone in the building beyond a quick greeting. But tonight, everything had changed. He had offered a blanket, and Leo had accepted, and in that small act, something new had begun. "Thanks again for the blanket, Evan," Leo said, pulling it a little tighter around their shoulders. "It really helped." "No problem, Leo," Evan replied. "Glad I grabbed it." In the quiet moment that followed, a clear thought bloomed in Evan's mind. This was more than just two neighbors sharing warmth. This was the start of something new. A quiet friendship, forged in the middle of a chaotic night, under the cold glow of streetlights. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but a gentle, steady feeling of connection. They had faced a scary moment together, found comfort in each other, and shared their small, human worries. Leo seemed to feel it too. He didn't look away, his eyes holding a friendly, knowing gaze. There was no need for grand words or big promises. The understanding was simply there, a warm, new presence in the stillness. They were still cold, still waiting, and still uncertain about what the morning would bring for their homes. But they were no longer strangers. They were friends, standing together, a small, warm island in the quiet, dark night. The chaos had faded, and in its place, a quiet, unexpected bond had formed. The quiet deepened, wrapping around Evan and Leo like a second, invisible blanket. The streetlights, which had seemed so harsh just hours ago, now cast a softer, almost sleepy glow. Above the building, the sky was starting to change. A very faint hint of gray, then a soft blush of pink began to spread across the darkest blue. Dawn was slowly, gently approaching. Evan watched the sky, a peaceful sigh escaping him. The cold was still there, a crisp bite in the air, but the fear and confusion had settled into a weary calm. He felt tired but not upset. The long night, with all its sudden noise and worry, was giving way to a new day. Leo also looked towards the brightening sky. "Looks like morning," he murmured, his voice a little raspy from the cold. He leaned a bit more into Evan, a comfortable silence stretching between them. The shared blanket felt even warmer now, a symbol of their unexpected connection. A firefighter, his face smudged with soot, walked over to a small group of neighbors. "All right, folks," he announced, his voice tired but clear. "It looks like a small electrical fire on the 4th floor. It's out now. We'll be letting you back in slowly, floor by floor, to check for any damage." A ripple of quiet relief went through the crowd. People started to stir, stretching their cramped limbs. The news wasn't perfect, but it was good. No major fire, no huge loss. Just a long, cold night. Evan and Leo exchanged a look. A small, knowing smile passed between them. They had spent the night as strangers thrown together by chance, finding warmth and quiet talk in the middle of chaos. Now, as the first light of dawn painted the sky, they were leaving as something more. "Well," Leo said, a hint of his usual cheer returning. "Looks like I might get to fix that leaky faucet after all." Evan chuckled. "And I can finally finish my book and check on Mittens." He started to carefully fold the blanket, but Leo put a hand on his arm. "Keep it wrapped for a bit longer," Leo suggested. "It's still pretty chilly." They stayed like that for a few more minutes, sharing the last moments of the blanket's warmth and the quiet calm of the approaching dawn. The streetlights dimmed as the sky grew brighter, making the fire trucks look less urgent, more like everyday vehicles. The new day brought with it the promise of returning to their lives, but for Evan and Leo, it also brought a quiet understanding. The unexpected calm of the night, born from shared discomfort and a simple act of kindness, had woven a new thread of friendship between them. It was a connection they hadn't looked for, but one that felt right, a warm memory from a cold, strange night.